Hey everybody, I'm Henry Kaiser, and welcome to 5 Hats, where I bring you into my process developing a video game as a producer, designer, engineer, artist, and journalist. Now, for a game that's a work in progress, creating an automated way to flip stock assets into stylized dev art is super valuable, especially if it's forward compatible and flexible. So for this episode, let's put on the artist hat and dive into my pixelated paper character pipeline. I mentioned in the designer hat video standing out as a work in progress that a 2D character style will help me scream not trying to be a AAA game to indie audiences that are judging the first looks. But going with that path comes an immediate hurdle: making 2D characters. I'm not a 2D character artist or animator, and it's not something I can just get good at quickly. So to make this design choice work, I chose a pipeline that would lean into my strengths, turning 3D characters into 2D. The pipeline I'm showing uses Mixamo, Blender, Aseprite, and PaperZD. Mostly free except for Aseprite's one-time cost of $20. I'm currently using it for temporary development art, but it is forward compatible, and it's going to convert any character models I select for the final game into the same stylization that I'm using right now. Alright, let's go through the steps. Step 1, Trello card. Plan out what animations I need for the character and set individual checklists to track progress through the process. So we can see downloaded, is it finished rendering, is it in Unreal? After that, we're off to Adobe Mixamo. Here on Mixamo.com, we start with selecting a character. No need for it to match your long-term vision. This is just a dev art character that you can eventually replace with a final 3D asset. Before you grab animations, download the character in the default T-pose, so you can animate them as necessary using other sources. Then, it's onto the Animations tab. Find an animation that you have on your Trello checklist and download it. If the character changes where they are in the scene, like with a walking animation, try to use the in-place options where available. Like so. Now, go ahead and download it, and once it's downloaded and unpacked, we're over to Blender. The goal with Blender is to turn 3D animations into sequences of 2D images that can eventually become a sprite sheet. The work here is where it gets a bit more technical, but you can think of it in stages. So stage 1, load up your animated character and decide how many frames you want per animation, because this will fundamentally affect the size of your sprite sheet and thus the file size. For mine, I'm using 12 frames for fast looping animations, like walking and running, and 24 frames for drawn out events, like a character's defeat. Now, once you know how long it should be, adjust the length of the animation to the number of frames you decided. So here you can see that right now, the character is running in place every 12 frames. Next, decide how many perspectives you need of your character, because you need a full render of the animation from each direction. A side scroller, like the original Mario, had 2-sided directionality. Classic Pokemon had 4-sided directionality. The characters I'm creating will have 8-sided directionality. And so I will loop the character animation to play 8 times. Why? Well, let's talk about the camera. I need to record my character from each of its 8 directions. So I animate it to change positions every 12 or 24 frames. Additionally, I need to change the camera's settings from the perspective lens or perspective type used by filmmakers to a flattening orthographic lens, ideal for game sprites. If we weren't doing any stylizing, we could stop here, set our export settings to PNG, and render animation. However, I want to add a retro look to each character so they look similar artistically. That's accomplished with Blender's compositing process. So how does that work? Compositing inputs what the camera sees on the left and changes how it is rendered and exported as it moves through processes to the right. My pipeline right now has 3 stages. On the left, we take in what the camera sees, and we calculate a black alpha outline around the edge of the character. Now, I don't use this currently for in-game characters, but I do for some NPCs and monsters. And you can kind of see here the outline as it gets calculated, and here where the camera and the outline are now overlaid. Next, moving to the left, I blur, shrink, and pixelate the image. Now, deciding how much to pixelate, controlled by this value here, starts by eye. But now I have this handy table to standardize my pixelization from animation to animation. We'll come back to that in a moment. As we move the output to the final stage of compositing, we have posterization. This is how I compress the number of colors used per character. It is a simple technique and it further unifies the disparate characters into a single style. Now, really, for compositing, that's it. Input, stroke, pixelate, posterize, output. Now, when we render our animation using Blender's render animation button here, it will export to a folder a bunch of these individual animation frames, which will combine using the next software, Aseprite. Now here, Aseprite is a pixel art animation software, and for our pipeline, these final steps are a bit simpler and more mechanical. First, we import the entire folder of images and change the canvas size. Now, you can see here as we go ahead and we change the canvas size, we need to select a certain width. Where do we get this number from? Well, the canvas size is determined by that table that we saw a moment ago. So this table considers the image we exported. For mine, a constant 1080 by 1080 is my output settings for Blender, as well as the orthographic scale, which is a camera setting in Blender, which I can show you here, orthographic scale, and pixelization scale, a compositor value that I control right here. Small characters and very contained animations fit within the smallest settings and give the best gameplay performance. They are turned into canvases of 90 by 90. So let's go ahead and do that in Aseprite right now. 90 by 90. And so now as we zoom in, we can see our character lining up within this 90 by 90 square. Now, larger characters or wider animations need larger settings and canvas sizes, and I try to use these sparingly. Once the canvas size is set, I just need to select each direction of 12 or 24 frame long animations, tag and name them. So let's look at that in this one here, which has already got it all laid out. We can see running down, left, up, left, and so forth with each directionality. These tags are used in the export settings to ensure each direction is individually prepared in Unreal. Final step, go up to File, Export a sprite sheet. We go ahead and we select both an output file that runs as a PNG and a JSON data file that makes sure to split based on layers, tags, and slices. We're really only using tags, but you may use layers and slices in more advanced projects. Additionally, on the Sprite tab, we want to make sure we split by tags. So now we can see how each of these images are laid out into one sheet that has an animation of each directionality per row. Now, we go ahead, we hit export, it's a quick loading bar, and voila! I have one 2D animation complete for an Unreal Engine paper character. And I haven't even done any manual 2D animating. Now, characters generally have multiple animations, and some light Python coding will automate this whole pipeline as design styles finalize. But for now, end to end, I can create a new character and have all their actions 2D animated fairly quickly. Now, that's just generating the asset. In the next video, we'll be putting on the engineer hat and showing you how these 2D characters and animations are set up within Unreal Engine to give us that 2D within 3D gameplay. See you on that episode of 5 Hats. Take care.